shoot, and Bob was asking me if I was familiar with Little Walter and some of the photographs that had been taken with him back in the day. And I'm a big harmonica fan of harmonica players. I'm very familiar with Little Walter. And I said, well, which photograph is he talking about? He said, you know, the one where he's got the harp and it's like the Hollywood lighting and all that? And I said, I'm on it. I know it. And in fact, back then we were listening to CDs, and I had a whole a boombox with a bunch of CDs laid out there. You know, one of them being the Little Walter CD, which was incredible. And so he showed up. We were shooting at the Ambassador Hotel, which is in Los Angeles. Has a lot of history, deep history. The Rat Pack used to play there in the Coconut Grove room. Robert Kennedy was assassinated there. There was a lot of history there. And unbeknownst to me, Bob was so incredibly interested in the place and being there that that was all a positive for us. So he really was intrigued and ended up coming and staying for several hours, more than he actually had even promised me. It was incredible. And this photograph here is taken with an old Polaroid camera. It's the photograph we talked about. And at a certain point, they started using it for what you would call the boxing poster to promote all the Dylan shows. And I think that they used it for about 10 years, I really do. And I saw it everywhere, all over the world. I would go to Sweden, I'd be in Sweden and I'd see a big poster, you know, Bob Dylan and his band, don't you dare miss it. And so that's that photo. So all the stories won't be this long.
You know, one of the things that you told me a while ago, when you photograph Bruce, it's more like a partnership. It's a partnership between you and the subject, in particular Bruce, where there's a dialogue that actually occurs as to what needs to be done, how you want to do it, etc. Was that the same with Bob?
It was. You know, I think, these artists they're artists and they're entertainers, and some people understand that, and others want to be just artists, some want to be both. And I feel like with Bruce and Bob, I feel like they understand that they're entertainers and they understand how to collaborate. And they've checked their look in the mirror a bunch of times. They know where they look good. And you know, it's my job to be a good collaborator also. And what would happen with Bob was that we sat down, we had a quick conversation about what we were going to do. And he was already looking sharp, and he had on this great cowboy hat, and he after we had our discussion, he walked over to fix his hat, and I just right away had my Leica, like I always do, and I just went over there and got a couple of shots of him in the mirror, and I set the tone that, like, not just the ones where you're looking at the camera, but I'm going to document this whole afternoon, and he seemed to be really receptive to it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's see the next photo.
This was taken at the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City, and Bob did a couple of shows there, and really they just asked me if I wanted to come over and photograph and document, and we did a couple other portraits and things like that as well. But this was, again, these are the moments that I love to capture. It was during the rehearsal, we were hanging out, he was lighting a cigarette, and I just grabbed this photo.
Yeah. Was he conscious of the camera? In other words, your job, of course, is to make yourself invisible, I presume.
Yeah.
But clearly, people can see you have a camera. Obviously, he knew that. How did he react to that sort of thing?
He just let it happen, you know? I mean, you see Don't Look Back, and I mean, it's a great example. It's like really my go-to inspiration for even still photography. It's like, and the relationship that Bob had with Pennebaker, where he was just like, I'm not even going to acknowledge you here. I'm just going to do my thing, and you capture it. And I think that was part of that. Next picture. This was taken at Bonnaroo. I was the only photographer that was allowed to shoot the Dylan show, and it was really cool because beforehand, I got the word that, like, you can photograph for the festival, and Bob is cool with it, and he wants to have a word with you beforehand. And I was like, wow, okay. So I was kind of hanging out by the tour buses, and people would come up to me, like Warren Haynes from Government Mule and Allman Brothers walked up, and he's like, hey, Danny, what are you doing? I was like, I'm waiting for Bob Dylan, man. Just go. I don't want him to come around the corner and then not come over and talk to me. It became really funny. People were coming to try to small talk with me, and I was like, beat it. So he came over, and he really just was encouraging me to, to stand over here if you like, do this, do that. I'm cool with it. And he connected me with his stage manager. It was really a great moment. And afterwards, I got a great photograph of him and Jeff Tweedy. That's one of my favorites also.
You know, when you photograph someone like Bob, obviously all the way back to the early 60s with John Cohn and Daniel Kramer, all these great photographers who shot Bob, how much research as a photographer do you put into planning what you plan to, what you ultimately want to do, I should say?
I think what I do is I make a plan, and I have an idea of what I want to do and what I want to accomplish, and feeling good about, like, if I get this, I'm going to be psyched. But I always am leaving the door open for spontaneity. And I'll tell you, the shoot that I did, with Bob in '99 was exactly like that. I had all these plans and everything went great. I got amazing stuff, but then there's images that I never could have imagined I would have captured, because I was ready and I was open-minded and he was giving it to me, And there's one in here that I'll point out that I really love that happened that way. Next. This is also from the '99 session. It's just one of my favorite portraits of him. Real simple. I love that cowboy hat, and it's just, again, this is the idea that if it's classic and simple, it can still be powerful.
One of the great things about Dylan, one of the great things about the Beatles, is that their sense of invention and reinventions, particularly not just in the music, but the way they look. So Bob has been, we saw it in the videos that Jeff showed us, the evolution of Bob Dylan's look, right? And here's a particular look that, it's almost like Hank Williams-esque or something like that. How do you make sure that even though that's happening, you still capture the essence of the man, the essence of the artist?
Some people like to be directed and some people don't, and some people don't, even if they don't need to be directed. I feel like it's my job to encourage them and let them know that it's feeling good and it's looking good. And I think it's just one of those moments where you take a bunch of them and then there's the one that really stands out, where there's a connection and you can feel it.
Next one.
So this photograph was one of the ones I was talking about that I took in Los Angeles at the Ambassador. And we were taking a walk around the location because Bob, like I said, Bob was really interested in the space, and he started to understand that. And he would just walk through the hallways, and he would come over and peer out the window, and I would just say, like, "Oh wow, this is great. Let me grab that," or I wouldn't say anything and just take it. And I love this photograph because you don't have to see his face, and you know who it is. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's great. My experience with photographers, watching photographers shoot, is that you want to keep shooting and shooting and shooting. The session for you is never over. How do you know when a session is over with Bob Dylan?
Well, that's a great question. Do you know the answer to that? Okay, because what happened was I was photographing him with that big chromatic harmonica, and at the end of the session, we were towards the end. I was like, all of a sudden, I'm like, geez, we've been shooting for like 6 hours. Like, I can't even believe he's still here. And engaged and really into it. So we're having a great time. We're shooting him with this big chromatic, and I was doing a close-up of his hands on this harmonica. And I have that old Polaroid camera, which I shot some of those you've seen. And I said, I got to get a Polaroid of this. Will be great because I can print from these Polaroids. They're beautiful. And I had a light bounced in the ceiling to just give me a little bit of light, and that was my technique at the time. And I picked the camera up and I got all focused in, and I was just ready to take the picture. And the light just went like, bzzz, and it went out, and we're like standing there in the dark. And Bob said, well, I think we're done. Okay. Yeah.
There you go. Next.
This is from that session. This was in Love and Theft, the special packaging, which made me really proud. And it was cool because we were, thinking of, something to do, and give Bob some business, as we call it, do something. And we sent out for some newspapers, and the person came back with a bunch of different languages and that. And so there's this classificado. And, the funny thing is somebody said to me one time, they said, I love that photograph you took of Bob Dylan looking for a job. Okay. He did want to know, though, I was using a wide-angle lens, and he looked from behind the thing, and he said, hey, are you getting my shoes? I like your shoes. And I said, yeah, I'm getting your shoes. True story, yeah.
Next.
Okay. So, I wasn't sure when this one was coming up, but I certainly can't one-up Jeff Rosen, because I got to say, I just want to say one more time, that was epic in my mind. All that footage he showed, the things that we've seen, the things we haven't seen, as a filmmaker and a music lover, and that Pennebaker right in Dylan's face, that shows you an example of a great relationship between two people. And that's what really impressed me about that, was really exciting from my point of view. I was just dying over that. That was incredible. So I bought this photograph, which I don't believe has been published before. It was one that I've always loved, and it goes through a process when you shoot the photos of what gets approved and what doesn't, and why, and all these different reasons. And of course, using for album packaging and publicity and for these posters is like, to be a part of that history is like, means so much to me. And this photograph right here was one that I always loved, and I've just kind of been keeping in my back pocket. And it's.
I'm going to say before we're almost out of time, but I had, thanks to Jeff, I had the opportunity some years ago, after I had left the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and gone out to Seattle to start Experience Music Project, Paul Allen's museum out in Seattle, and Paul Allen and Jeff and Bob and Martin Scorsese teamed up for No Direction Home. You probably remember that PBS series. And so we got to do I got to curate the first ever, I think it was first, Jeff, right? First ever exhibit on Bob Dylan. And it was called Bob Dylan's American Journey. And it was the first time, and you talk about, photographing Bob and what that means. I mean, you're photographing Dylan. That's a big deal. You can imagine in my neck of the woods what it was like having the responsibility of actually interpreting Bob Dylan's life and career in the 1960s through an exhibit using photographs, but also using objects and all kinds of different things, words, etc. A tremendous sense of responsibility. And I'm wondering, closing for you, there is a responsibility that you have as a photographer to do it right, to get it right, and to make certain that there's a connection between the artist and the audience, and where you just step aside as a photographer, me as a curator, and let that dialogue occur.
I mean, I love the portraits, and I love being a part of these things, and I'm a big fan of the document. And my style balances between those things. Some of the artfulness of one, and some of the simple qualities of the other. And I feel like, it is an honor to photograph, these people who really mean a lot to people on several levels. They get people through rough times, they help you celebrate, and these are really important figures, and to be a part of that is really great. Yeah.
I would also mention two things, two commercials, if you will. Number one, right now we have at the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles, if you're out on the West Coast, there is a photo exhibit on Bob Dylan done by Daniel Kramer, something that we've been working with Daniel, photographs of 64, 65, that I'm sure you're very familiar with.
By all those
amazing,
guys,
yeah. And so if you're out there, that's around. And then Danny is part of a photographic exhibit that Grammy Museum has curated with the photographers on Bruce Springsteen, called Bruce Springsteen, A Photographic Journey. Pam Springsteen, Danny, Eric Mueller, others.
Stefanko. Yeah.
And that's going to Princeton University. So you watch for that and you can see some of Danny's work on Bruce and kind of get the scope of how important a photographer he is today. Because I don't mean to embarrass you, but in the last 15, 20 years or so, there's hardly been someone who has done the kind of work that Danny has done in terms of photographic styles and images. He brings a whole new sensibility to photography in the world of popular and roots music. So thank you for that.
And I also wanted to let you guys know that we have a film that's screening at the Paramount called Louisiana Fairy Tale, which is a collaboration between the Preservation Hall Jazz Band and the